Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today, as part of my B-Tier guides for Dragon Age Origins, I'm going to take you through a special build for a mod companion, Ser Gilmore. Ser Gilmore is an NPC from the human noble origin who is a knight in service of the Kuzlan family at their castle. He's a temporary companion in the origin, helping you fight off some giant rats when you go fetch your dog from the kitchen larder. He's a quite well-liked NPC, so it makes sense that there is a mod that allows you to recruit him as a full companion to take along on your adventures. The mod is called Ser Gilmore Companion NPC Fully Voiced, and it was created by Immortality. There is also a mod that allows you to take Ser Gilmore and the dog into the Awakening expansion, also by the same author. There are other NPCs I would have loved to see as recruitable companions depending on your warden's origin story. Gorham for the dwarf noble, Leske for the dwarf commoner, Fenrel or Merrill for the Dalish elf, Soris for the city elf, Jowan for the circle mage. I imagine it would have been a lot of extra work for the devs, however, to have a fully voiced companion with unique lines and banter with the other companions, while only really making sense to be recruitable if your warden had a particular origin. I think Ser Gilmore works really well as a full companion because we're told during the origin that Duncan came to Highever looking for warden recruits and that he intended to test Ser Gilmore. Clearly, if Gilmore's skills as a knight were good enough to be considered for recruitment into the Grey Wardens, then that makes him a strong potential companion as well. Without further ado, let's get into the build. Now, in the origin, Ser Gilmore is clearly a weapon and shield warrior. If you're planning on using him, you may want him to replace Alistair, in which case I recommend basically following my Alistair build guide without the Templar specialization, because it doesn't make much sense for Gilmore to get Templar abilities. However, I want to make a lore-friendly build for Ser Gilmore that's different from Alistair's, so that if you want to, you could use them both, Alistair as a full tank, and Gilmore as a tanky damager. I do recommend that if you use both Alistair and Ser Gilmore in your party, then your warden is better off as an archer or mage so that you can also have damage from afar, not just melee. I'll discuss party composition in more depth in the tactics section. As a note, if you don't have the PC version or otherwise don't want to use Ser Gilmore, you can also use this build as a more offensive option for any sword and shield warrior. They'll still be relatively tanky due to using a shield, but will also deal good damage. In terms of skills, Ser Gilmore has maxed out combat training, granting him access to learning all tiers of weapon style talents, as well as giving him some combat-related bonuses. I'm unsure if he has any other skills if you manage to recruit him later on, such as if you went to do some DLC or side content and then returned to Lothering at a higher level. At level 7, these are the abilities that Ser Gilmore has unlocked. From the warrior tree, powerful, precise striking, taunt, and disengage. From the weapon and shield tree, shield bash, shield pummel, shield block, and shield cover. Do note that I have the follower auto-scaling tweak from Dane's Fixes, so companions don't auto-level past level 7. When I recruited him at level 7, I also had 3 attribute points and 1 talent point to spend, so I'm unsure which talent he would unlock by himself otherwise. Powerful is a passive that grants a bonus of plus 25 health and a reduction of 10% fatigue. This is great since it reduces the fatigue from wearing armor and thus keeps the stamina cost of talents lower. Precise Striking is a sustained ability that gives a penalty of minus 10% attack speed, but grants plus 10 attack as well as some amount of critical chance that scales with the character level. If you get Gilmore at level 7, the crit chance bonus will be plus 6%. Late game, if you manage to get him all the way to level 25, the maximum crit chance bonus would be plus 15%. Shield Bash does what it says on the tin, having a chance to knock the target down unless it passes a physical resistance check versus the warrior's strength. Shield Pummel has a chance to stun the target for 4 seconds if it fails a physical resistance check versus the warrior's strength. It can also do a decent amount of damage from the weapon and shield attacks that the warrior does as part of this talent. I will note that if you use the Shield Offensive Talents tweak from Dane's Fixes, which I greatly recommend, then some of the very specific details of these talents will be different than the vanilla versions. This is why I'm not going into full detail about these talents, because they can function slightly differently depending on whether you use the tweak or not. But the important things, which are the knockdown of Shield Bash and stun of Shield Pummel, remain the same. Shield Block is a great passive that makes enemies no longer receive flanking bonuses when attacking the warrior on the shield carrying side. There's apparently a bug in the vanilla game regarding this passive, but I assume that Dane's Fixes takes care of it. Shield Cover is not a sustained talent I normally use, but it can be quite useful when you are battling many archers because it grants a bonus of plus 10 missile deflection when active, and it can be improved by the Shield Mastery passive, which gives it another plus 10. We don't care as much about defenses with this build since Gilmore won't be the tank of the party, but you can use Shield Cover when he's being attacked by ranged enemies. Even though Gilmore has Taunt and Disengage unlocked, they're not needed for this build, so if you have our Specialization mod, you could remove these two abilities and put points in more relevant ones. The Ser Gilmore Companion mod equips Gilmore with some good starting gear that is mostly unique other than the shield. He wields the Sword of High Ever, a tier 3 longsword with plus 2% melee crit chance, plus 1 armor penetration, and 1 rune slot. This is a great early game sword. It's not overpowered by any means, but it is good enough to last until the mid or late game. In his offhand, he has the Shield of High Ever, which is exactly the same shield as the one you can loot from the treasury during the Human Noble origin. Of course, there can be multiple such shields with the Kuzland heraldry, and it makes sense that he would have one as a knight serving the Kuzlands. The shield is tier 2 and has a plus 4 to attack. He wears a special tier 4 medium armor set that doesn't seem to have any set bonuses but is quite powerful. Roland's gloves have plus 1 armor and a chance to avoid missile attacks. Roland's armor, the chest piece, has plus 2 willpower, plus 2 constitution, plus 3 armor, and plus 10% spell resistance. Roland's boots have plus 1 armor and plus 10% chance to dodge. Finally, he has an old engagement ring that grants plus 3 strength and plus 10% to healing effects received. Do note that you do need the Dane's Fixes mod to ensure that the healing effects bonus works properly. The ring isn't amazing by any means, but it does give him a good strength bonus, so you can absolutely keep it on him if you want to. I will say that as early game gear, the armor is a bit on the strong side. Although, to be fair, you can easily have powerful DLC items either from the start of the game or from early DLC areas. I also have a soft spot for medium armor, and since there aren't many medium armor pieces with bonuses in the game, this is a great set in my eyes. While the bonuses of the armor set are great, the set itself is just tier 4, and so it doesn't have a very good base armor rating. If you think the bonuses are worth keeping, or you want to let Gilmore wear this armor for role-playing purposes, I think it's absolutely reasonable to do so. Just give him a helmet and some accessories, and he should be fine, at least on lower difficulties. The sword and shield aren't as good though, so I would recommend switching those unless you're playing on easy. Since we're going for a damager weapon and shield warrior, we will mainly be focusing on strength, so just put enough points in dexterity to unlock some weapon and shield talents. You'll need 26 dexterity to unlock shield mastery. Other than that, most of your points should go in strength. It will increase Gilmore's attack, damage, physical resistance, and also allow him to equip higher tier weapons and armors. I also recommend getting his cunning score up to 16 so that you can max out the survival skill for some nice bonuses. In terms of skills, Gilmore already has combat training maxed out at level 7. Other than that, I struggle to recommend anything other than the survival skill, which offers some extra nature resistance and also allows you to see nearby enemies on the map. I can't see Ser Gilmore having an interest in herbalism, poison making, trap making, or stealing. That leaves combat tactics perhaps, if you don't want to micromanage him and want him to have more tactics slots so you can customize his combat behavior in more detail. In addition to the starting abilities Gilmore already has, I will now recommend the other good talents. I will discuss specialization abilities in the Specializations section. Do note that I assume you and your companions will be around level 21 by the end of the game, so I always try to recommend a number of abilities that you will be able to unlock if you reach level 21. From the warrior tree, unlock Bravery and Deathblow. They do require Threaten to be unlocked, so I wouldn't recommend going for them super early. Bravery is a passive that grants plus 1 damage, plus 3 physical and mental resistance, as well as a separate bonus to critical chance that begins at plus 3.5% and increases proportionally to the number of enemies above 2 that the warrior is engaging. Deathblow is a passive that grants stamina whenever the warrior kills an enemy. The stamina is equal to 20% of the victim's health. This passive is extremely useful for warriors who rely on activated weapon talents, and I will recommend that you use your talents quite often, so it's great to have. From the weapon and shield tree, here are the good ones: Overpower, Assault, Shield Tactics, and Shield Mastery. Overpower is an activated talent that bashes the target 3 times, and all hits are crits. If the last hit connects, the target is knocked down unless it passes a physical resistance check against a warrior's strength. If the target is knocked down, they are also dazed for 10 seconds, reducing their attack and defense by 5. The Dane's Fixes Shield Offensive Talents tweak resolves an issue with the damage done by these shield bashes, so again, I highly recommend having this mod. Overpower also has the chance to shatter a frozen or petrified enemy. Assault is an activated talent that has the character strike the target 4 times and gives a bonus of plus 3 armor penetration and plus 8 attack to these strikes, but each successful attack reduces the damage done by minus 40%. It's a bit of a weird talent, and I'm not sure how effective it is due to the reduced damage of subsequent strikes, but the extra armor penetration should be useful against highly armored enemies. Shield Tactics is a passive that makes attackers not receive any flanking bonus to attack and provides immunity from backstabs. If the enemy rogue has coup de grace and Gilmore is paralyzed or stunned, this does not protect against that. Shield Mastery is a great passive that grants bonuses to many weapon and shield talents. Shield Bash and Shield Pummel get an attribute bonus added to their attacks, Assault and Overpower weapon damage rolls are maximized, and Shield Cover gets an additional +10 missile deflection. I will note that the tweak from Dane's Fixes improves the bonus you get for Shield Bash and Shield Pummel. Ser Gilmore starts with the Champion Specialization unlocked at level 7, granting him +2 willpower and +1 cunning. The champion talents are all useful, so I recommend unlocking all 4. Warcry is an activated talent that gives nearby enemies a penalty of -10 attack. It can be improved by the Superiority passive, which makes it have a chance to knock down enemies unless they pass a physical resistance check against a warrior's strength. Rally is a sustained talent that gives nearby allies +10 defense, but gives the warrior a penalty of -2 stamina regeneration. It can be improved by the Motivate passive, which provides nearby allies with a +10 to attack as well. The second specialization I recommend at level 14 for Ser Gilmore is Berserker. I think it would fit the righteous anger he likely feels at Howe's betrayal, as well as his dedication to the Grey Wardens, and possibly to your character, the hero of Ferelden. The specialization itself grants +2 strength and +10 health. From the Berserker talents, I only recommend you unlock the first 3, because Final Blow uses up all of the warrior's remaining stamina, turns off all sustained abilities, and it's not even that good since it just does some extra damage based on the stamina it used up. Berserk is a sustained talent that grants +8 damage, +10 mental resistance, and a penalty to stamina regeneration. It can be improved by the next 2 passive abilities. Resilience grants a bonus to health regeneration. Constraint makes the stamina regeneration penalty go away. Generally, I recommend not using Berserk unless you know you have enough stamina regeneration to keep it up, but of course, you'll have no issues using it once you unlock the Constraint passive. If you're interested in taking Ser Gilmore as a companion in the Awakening expansion, the specialization I recommend for him there is Guardian, because I think it fits him well, as he is a knight who is sworn to protect those around him. In terms of gear, I've already said that Gilmore is equipped with good early game items by the mod, and you can definitely keep his starting armor for role-playing purposes, at least on lower difficulties. However, I will still recommend better options, as you may find you are struggling in the mid or late game with his starting armor set, even though its bonuses are good just because it's lower tier and thus has a lower base armor score. But first, let's talk weapons. Even though I would love to be able to recommend more varied one-handed weapons, unfortunately longswords are just the best in terms of base damage and critical chance, which is what we care about. The Sword of Highever that Gilmore has is good for the early game, especially because it has a rune slot, but I would absolutely switch it out once you have a better sword. Asturian Smite is a tier 3 or tier 6 longsword with +2 damage, +1 armor penetration, 1 to 2 rune slots, and it weakens nearby Darkspawn. It can be looted from the DLC area Soldier's Peak if you do the Ancient History side quest. I don't recommend this sword for the late game, but it's a good earlier mid-game replacement for Gilmore. Do note that in the base game, the weakened Darkspawn property does nothing, but Dane's Fixes implements it to reduce the attack and defense of nearby Darkspawn. Another longsword you can get from Soldier's Peak is Starfang, a tier 8 sword with +3 dexterity, +3 damage, +2.5 armor penetration, and 3 rune slots. You obtain it by bringing Michael Dryden, a meteor metal ore found in the random encounter The Crater, and asking him to craft you the longsword version. You can only craft one version, either the longsword or the greatsword, so it depends on what you want to use in a specific playthrough. I have to say though that this is an amazing longsword for its base damage and damage and armor penetration bonuses, as well as because it has 3 rune slots. It's very hard to beat. Finally, the other great choice for the late game is Merrick's Blade, a tier 5 to tier 7 sword with bonuses to health and stamina combat regen, +6 damage versus Darkspawn, and 2 to 3 rune slots. You can get it as part of the Return to Ostergard DLC, and it forms the weapon set Kaelin's Arms together with Kaelin's Shield. I don't recommend using the sword or the shield on their own, but if you use them together, the set bonus is +5 damage and +5 combat stamina regen, which is amazing, and also allows Gilmore to use talents more often due to the great stamina regen. However, you may want to use this set on an Arcane Warrior if you are using one in your party. In that case, I recommend using one of the other 2 swords. Next up, shields. The Shield of Highever Gilmore starts out with is unfortunately not that good since it only has a +4 bonus to attack. I recommend using either a kite shield or heavy shield because the unique shields in these categories have better bonuses than the smaller ones, and also because they offer more defense and missile deflection as well as more damage if you use Dane's Fixes. The Redcliffe Elite Shield is a tier 5 kite shield that grants +1 willpower, +3 defense, +15% electricity resistance, and +2 attack. You can get this as a reward from Arl Eamon after curing him with the ashes. Do note that if you sacrifice Isolde and your warden is a mage, he'll give you an enchanter staff instead. Bulwark of the True King is a tier 5 kite shield that grants +3 willpower, +2 constitution, +3 defense, and +1 armor. It is a DLC item available in your inventory from the beginning of the game. Kalen's shield is a tier 5 to tier 7 kite shield that grants +1 armor and +20 chance to avoid missiles. It's a DLC item you can loot during Return to Ostagar, and it forms the Kalen's arm set together with Merrick's blade. I don't recommend using this shield on its own, only give it to Gilmore if you're also giving him Merrick's blade. Earthheart's Portable Bulwark is a tier 5 heavy shield that grants +1 to strength, dexterity, and constitution. It may not offer as much on the bonuses side, but because it's a heavy shield, it has good base stats. You can purchase it from Bodan in the party camp. Finally, an optional recommendation. If you get lucky during the Warden's Keep DLC when you kill the possessed corpse of Sophia Dryden, the Warden Tower shield is great. It's a tier 6 heavy shield that grants +3 willpower, +6 defense, and +1 combat stamina regen. It's the highest tier heavy shield that has bonuses, but since it's a rare drop, it's only an option if RNG is on your side. In terms of armor, if you feel that Gilmore's set is getting a bit too weak in the mid or late game, it's time to get an upgrade. You may want to keep Roland's boots since they grant +1 armor and +10% chance to dodge, and any dodge bonus is great. However, if you're going for a full set, then you'll obviously have to replace them. If you want to use a full set, I recommend one of these three. The Diligence set is a tier 6 heavy armor set comprised of chest piece, gloves, and boots, which grants +0.5 combat health regen, +8 armor, +6 defense, and the set bonus is +5 willpower. Out of the set, the gloves are the best piece, granting a huge +4 armor bonus. You can find the gloves in a locked chest in Orzamar's Shaperate. The chest piece is on a knight's corpse in the Ruined Temple during the Urn of Sacred Ashes quest, and the boots are sold by Owen in his upgraded stock in Redcliffe after you save his daughter Velena from the castle. The Warden Commander set is a tier 2 to tier 7, depending on your level, massive armor set comprised of armor, gloves, and boots, which grants +1 armor, +0.5 combat stamina regen, +15% critical or backstab damage, +10 physical resistance, +50 stamina, +10% fire resistance, and the set bonuses are -12% fatigue and +2 constitution. You can obtain the set by killing the possessed corpse of Sophia Dryden in the DLC area Soldier's Peak. Kalen's set is a tier 5 to tier 7, depending on your level, armor set comprised of helm, gloves, chest piece, and boots, which grants +4 armor, +10 mental resistance, +15 physical resistance, +15% critical or backstab damage, +20% chance to dodge, and the set bonuses are -25% fatigue and +5 combat health regen. You can obtain it during the Return to Ostagar DLC. If you don't want to use a full armor set, then you could equip Gilmore with a more piecemeal armor. In terms of helmets, I recommend one of these three. Helm of Honleith is a tier 2 heavy helmet that grants +2 to all attributes and +3 armor, and can be looted from the DLC area Honleith. This is a highly contested item due to its bonuses to all attributes, so you may want to equip it on a different character. Helm of the Deep is a DLC tier 3 heavy helmet that grants +2 constitution and +10 physical and mental resistance. It's an item you should have from the beginning of the game, and it's a solid defensive option. Rockknocker is a tier 5 massive helmet that grants +25 physical resistance. You can obtain this helmet from 3 sources. One is dropped by the Broodmother in the Deep Roads, another is sold by Jannar in his shop in Orzammar, and the final one is sold by Gorham and Denerim in his restock shop after you complete 3 main quests. In terms of chest pieces, the best and only heavy chest piece I can recommend on its own is Yvonne the Great's Mail, purchasable from Heren in Denerim after 3 main quests have been completed. It's very expensive, but it's worth it because it grants +1 health and stamina combat regen, +6 armor, +10% chance to dodge, and +10 defense against missiles. Most guides recommend you use this in combination with Wade's superior heavy dragon scale set, but in my opinion, Wade's gloves and boots aren't as good as other pieces you could use, and the set bonus isn't the most groundbreaking thing either, so Yvonne's Mail is really solid on its own. If you don't want to use Yvonne's Mail on Gilmore, or you don't have the gold to purchase it, I recommend keeping Roland's chest piece since it has great bonuses and just replacing some of the other pieces will be good enough. For gloves, I recommend one of these. As I mentioned, the Gloves of Diligence tier 6 heavy gloves are amazing due to their +4 armor bonus. The gloves can be looted from a locked chest in Orzamar's Shaperate. Kalen's Gauntlets, tier 5 to tier 7 massive gloves, are pretty good, granting +1 armor and +15% critical or backstab damage. They can be obtained during the Return to Ostagar DLC. If you'd like to use medium gloves, you can either keep Roland's gloves or replace them with the Ancient Elven Gloves, tier 4 medium gloves granting +2 armor and +4% spell resistance. You can find the Ancient Elven Gloves in the Ruined Temple during the Urn of Sacred Ashes quest. Finally, for boots, if you want to replace Roland's boots, here are the options I recommend. The Kadash Stompers are the best medium boots, being tier 6 and granting +2 dexterity, +2 armor, +2% ranged and melee crit chance, but also increasing hostility. The increased hostility property doesn't work in the vanilla game, but it is implemented by Dane's fixes. The hostility should be okay if you have a tank in the party who uses Taunt and Threaten to keep Gilmore and the other party members from getting attacked too much. The best heavy boots are the Boots of Diligence, tier 6 boots granting +6 defense and +2 armor, which you can purchase from Owen's upgraded stock in Redcliffe after you save his daughter Velena from the castle. Kaelin's Greaves are the best massive boots, being a direct upgrade for Roland's boots as they grant +1 armor and +20% chance to dodge. Keep in mind that if you decide to use one of the armor pieces from a set, you won't be able to get the set bonus on another character. Moving on to accessories. In terms of belts, I don't have too many that I can recommend. The Cinch of Skillful Maneuvering is a DLC belt you unlock by completing an achievement from the Witch Hunt DLC, and it grants +1 to all attributes, +10% spell resistance, and +10% chance to dodge. It's a great belt to use on pretty much anyone, however, so it's quite contested. If you don't want to use the Cinch, then use one of these three. The Ornate Leather Belt grants +1 strength and can be purchased from Old Tegrin on the random map encounter Gentle Path. The Shadow Belt grants +3 melee crit chance and can be looted from the DLC area Soldier's Peak as part of doing the Ancient History side quest in the same stash that Asturian Smite is found in. Finally, the Sword Belt grants +1 armor penetration and can be purchased from Gorham's restocked shop in Denerim after you complete 3 main quests. In terms of amulets, there aren't really any good offensively focused amulets, so you can either go for something more general or defensive. Pearl of the Anointed is a DLC amulet you should have from the beginning of the game that grants +1 to all attributes. Heart of Witherfang grants +1 strength and magic and +50% nature resistance, and can be looted from Witherfang if you side with Zathrian during the Dalish Elves main quest. Two good defensive amulets are Mark of Vigilance and Magister's Shield, which are very similar to each other. Mark of Vigilance is a DLC amulet you should have from the beginning of the game, which grants +6 defense, +2% spell resistance, and +5 mental resistance. Magister's Shield is an amulet you can obtain during the Last Request side quest in the deserted building in Denerim, and it grants +6 defense, +12 defense against missiles, +4% spell resistance, and -10 nature resistance. In terms of rings, other than Gilmore's old engagement ring, whether you want to keep it or not, here are some good options. The Harvest Festival ring grants +2 strength and dexterity and +4 attack, and can be obtained from the DLC area Honleith Village. Key to the City grants +2 to all attributes, +4% spell resistance, and +10% healing effects received, and can be found in Orzammar when completing the Key to the City hidden side quest. It's a contested item due to being really good, but I'm mentioning it as an option. Ring of the Warrior grants +2 strength and dexterity, and can be found at the end of the Drifter's Cache quest in the Deep Roads. The Wicked Oath is a DLC item you should have in your inventory, which grants +10% critical or backstab damage, +1 armor penetration, and +1 combat stamina regen. In terms of runes, my usual recommendations apply. Silverite runes grant damage versus Darkspawn, and are thus great to enchant your weapons with when you are going in an area that has a lot of Darkspawn to kill. Cold Iron runes grant damage versus undead, and are similarly useful in areas that have a lot of undead, such as Redcliffe and to some extent the Brazilian Forest. Otherwise, I recommend using Fire and Lightning runes. Darkspawn, Undead, and Sylvans are weak to fire, but it's also good against many humanoid enemies. Lightning is good against enemies that are resistant to fire. Finally, depending on what other gear you equip Gilmore with, I optionally recommend using a Master or Grandmaster Hail rune in a rune slot, as it grants extra physical resistance and can help Gilmore resist various physical effects, such as knockdowns, which can be quite annoying. You can buy a Grandmaster Hail rune from Owen's upgraded stock in Redcliffe. If you just want a Master rune, you can buy one from the Wonders of Theda's shop in Denerim. I don't think Ser Gilmore would know how or want to use any poisons or grenades, so I won't recommend any. That takes us finally to tactics. This build isn't difficult to execute by any means. You have a few sustained talents active: Precise Striking, Rally, and Berserk either if you have the extra stamina regen or if you have the Constraint passive unlocked. Other than that, you have 4 offensive shield talents: Shield Bash, Shield Pummel, Overwhelm, and Assault. I recommend keeping Overpower to use it on an enemy that is frozen or petrified to have a chance to shatter them. Shield Pummel is great to use if you need to stun an enemy. It's not an immediate stun, but it is effective. Shield Bash is a quick attack that is a possible knockdown, so you can use it against more lightweight enemies such as archers or mages to interrupt them from using an ability or spell. Warcry is a great ability to use when Gilmore has at least 3 or more enemies nearby so that their attack can be debuffed, and with the superiority passive there's also a chance to knock them down. In terms of defenses, other than Rally, you can also activate the Shield Cover Sustained in combat situations where you're up against multiple archers to get a good bonus to missile deflection. When your talents are on cooldown or there isn't a good reason to use them, just keep auto-attacking. You'll notice that this weapon and shield damager warrior can't do as much damage as a dual-wielding damager, archer, or mage, but they can do a good amount of damage as well as be relatively tanky due to wearing a shield. As usual, the highest priority targets are spellcasters, since they will wreck you in a fight if you don't kill them early. Elites and bosses are next, with the caveat that if there are a lot of normal enemies, you want to thin out the herd so that they don't overwhelm you with their numbers. In terms of party composition, alongside Gilmore, I recommend having a proper tank who can either use weapon and shield, two-handed weapons, or Shale is also a great tank. Other than having a tank, I always recommend having at least one mage in the party so that they can heal allies, cast haste to increase the party's attack speed, have a weapon enchantment active to add damage to melee weapons in the party, and have access to many offensive and defensive spells. For your final party member, I recommend a ranged character, either an archer or a second mage. That is because Gilmore is already a melee damager, and you also need a tank who is by default a melee character. I never recommend having more than 2 melee characters in your party due to the fact that they will get stuck when you are fighting in smaller areas such as hallways or around doors, and it can get very annoying to see them struggling to reposition around enemies in these spaces. Ideally, I recommend an archer rogue so that you can also have a rogue in your party to unlock chests and doors, but if you're using the Lock Bash mod, then a rogue isn't really necessary and you could just use a second mage or even a warrior archer if you so desire. In conclusion, this weapon and shield damager build for Ser Gilmore, or for any other weapon and shield warrior really, is a damager tank hybrid which won't do as much damage as the usual damager builds. I do think the damage they can output is good enough, and they also have the advantage of not being as squishy as other damagers due to wearing a shield as well as being quite highly armored. This is definitely one of the most B-tier builds I've created as part of my B-tier guides, simply because it asks a tank-focused style of warrior to do damage. So as much as you try to build your warrior offensively, the power potential of this build is lower from the get-go. Still, it was a very fun build to create, especially as I was thinking about how Ser Gilmore would likely fight, while also focusing on making this build feel significantly different from my Alistair build. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this build guide for Ser Gilmore or for a damager weapon and shield warrior in Dragon Age Origins. If you're looking forward to seeing more of my Dragon Age and RPG videos, do remember to subscribe and leave a like and comment while you're at it too. They really help. This has been B-Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.